Today, let's see how to make a romantic t-shirt with Necchi Creator C2000. Let's start stabilizing the part that is to be embroidered with a hot transfer adhesive stabilizer. Then let's fold the t-shirt in half and iron the fold to have a reference that will be very useful later to center the design. Now insert the larger part of the frame inside the t-shirt and then also insert a piece of tearaway stabilizer to give it more rigidity. Fix the top of the hoop and use the grid to center the design. Close the clamp and then tighten the screw well to secure everything, after which turn the t-shirt this way and see that the back is well framed. Then remove the grid and open the t-shirt up nicely and finally insert the hoop into the embroidery arm. Now I move to the display, click on the cloud, select my file and then send it directly to the machine to start working on it. The first thing we need to do now is pull out the bottom thread, so we drop the needle down and then we raise the presser foot and pull over the bottom thread from underneath by bringing it above the fabric. Then we start the machine for a few stitches and after a few stitches we stop for a moment to cut off the excess thread. Now we are really ready to start with our embroidery, so we press on start and then the machine begins to embroider. Of course, we always have to be very careful so that the shirt does not end up under the embroidery, so we can also stop the outer part with some pins, for example. A very important thing to do when embroidering on a stretch fabric, as in this case, is to use a stretch needle. It is very important because the stretch needle has a round point, even if you can't see it, which doesn't break the fiber of the stretch fabric. When it's time to change color, we change the thread, but we also change the bobbin. When we embroider with a dark thread, such as black for example, we should insert black bobbin fill, while when we embroider with lighter color, it is better to use the white bobbin fill. When the embroidery is finished, we remove the hoop, making sure of course to get the t-shirt through well and then admire our work. Here it is, our t-shirt all embroidered. To remove the t-shirt from the hoop, we open the clamp, loosen the screw and then remove both the lower and upper frame. Now let's turn the t-shirt inside out because we need to tear off the stabilizer first, the tearaway stabilizer and then the heat transfer adhesive stabilizer that we ironed onto the t-shirt. To remove the stabilizer in the smaller parts, I use the machine spans because it has a rounded tip and it helps me to avoid piercing the fabric. Now, with the help of a dummy, we prepare for the next work. We fold a piece of tulle in half, leaving the top slightly shorter than the bottom, then find the center and pin it at the top seam of the shirt. Then we start curling to see how much gathering we need, so we begin with pins to place the gathering made with creases along the shoulder seam. I also thought to close the tulle under the sleeve, thus completing the entire tulle sleeve. With that done, let's measure how long the gathered part comes. To stitch the tulle, I turn the embroidery machine into a sewing machine and then I also take out the presser foot that I need for stitching and a screwdriver to remove the embroidery foot. I then remove the embroidery foot and insert the sewing foot, and then I can put all my accessory in the accessory holder that is on both the front and the back in my beautiful Necchi Creator C2000. Since I will then have to do a zigzag stitching that involves a width, I also change the plate, so I remove the embroidery plate and then I insert the sewing plate. For a better tension, it would also be better to chain the bobbin basket. I then put in a dark bobbin thread because I need to sew in black. Even if the machine provides a start and stop function, you can of course sew with the foot controller as well. Now, with a straight stitching, we make the creases to curl our tool. When we sew, we need the needle to always stop in the lower position, so we can click the little icon on the display to get precisely this function of the needle, and then we help ourselves with a screwdriver to make the creases. I make them this way. For example, I try to always stop at the same distance from the needle, and then I take a reference from which I start and I make the tool slide under the presser foot to create the fold this way. At the end of this job, we must have the same length that we have measured earlier. To sew the tool on the armhole, we use the free arm of the machine and select the triple zigzag stitch, which by default has a length of 1 mm. However, we reduce it, and as you see in the display, the stitch changes according to the adjustments we make. Before sewing, I always like to have some tests on a small piece of fabric to see if I'm okay with the width and the length of the stitch I selected. Now let's insert the t-shirt into the free arm through the neck, and then if we want we can also use the built-in dual feed system, which is really very convenient, and you can insert it even while sewing if you realize it could help you. And then we start sewing with our triple zigzag. At the end of the sewing, this is what we get. Try to stay a little bit above the sleeve seam because it comes out much better. Then we take the underside of the tool and stop one corner in the underside seam of the sleeve, and do the same thing with the other side as well, so that we can close the tool sleeve. We can use the same stitch to stop the two little corners this way. And there you have it. The bottom sleeve has been closed while the top sleeve remains open. Et voila! Our romantic t-shirt is finished. I find it really adorable and it's perfect for a special date. And all this was made with the beautiful Necchi Creator C2000. Happy sewing!